don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Turn the friggin' frogs gay. Serious crap. Gay. Frogs, friggin' frogs. It's not funny. I'm gonna say it real slow for you. Gay. Frogs. Won't you fight for your life?
Way off.
Gay. Frogs, friggin' frogs. I don't like a frog.
That's interesting. No?
Gay. Friggin' frogs. Frogs. Friggin' frog crap. Won't you fight the frogs? It's not funny. I'm gonna say it real slow for you. Frogs.
Wow. That got way fucked up. That is fucking awesome. That intro got totally fucked up, dude.
Did it glitch or something?
Yeah, hey glitch, that's funny. Full screen. Let's get us on full screen here. And what is up, everyone? This is the Tin Man with the Resistance. If you're watching this, you are the Resistance. And it is Beer 30, and I got King Cole on video. I don't know why everything is all glitchy today. And we got beer, and life is happy. For the most part, aside from the glitchy bitchiness that is my computer.
Gotta stop looking up that porn.
Right? Porn is awesome, man. It's Pornhub. They're attacking my computer.
That's why Pornhub's getting a hold of your channel.
Probably. Wouldn't surprise me.
So we're live right now?
We are live. And okay, we've had our preliminary video. I'm trying to figure out how to freaking get rid of all the glitchy evilness that is on my computer. Like, everything is fucking super slow right now. I have no idea what the fuck its problem is.
I got a bunch of fruit flies in here.
Yeah, I can't say that fruit flies are very fun. Fuck fruit flies. Okay. Maybe that'll allow my shit to run a little faster. Sexy.
Man.
Okay.
Alright. So can we jump into it or what?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this. Let's start with you, Cole. You said in your comment to me in response to the video that you think that I'm failing to grasp what it is you're trying to say. And I personally think that you and I are essentially trying to say a lot of the same things, and for the most part are in fact on the same page, but maybe it's being taken out of context or getting lost in translation. Like, we're saying the same thing, but perceiving it differently. So why don't you go ahead and try to clarify what it is you are trying to say.
All right. Well, I don't think there's a lot of subjects that we see eye to eye on. This one, I don't think we're seeing it the same way. Although you might think that we're seeing it the same way, this one, I don't think we're exactly seeing eye to eye, and that's what's disturbing me about the whole thing. You're kind of like a brother from another mother, so it's really disappointing to hear your viewpoint on this subject. And it all started with that Facebook post you made.
Yeah.
About the Martin Luther King statue, how he was against gay marriage, and if he was against gay marriage, should we take down his statue too? Almost, I I don't know what the word would be, sympathizing with these Confederate statues or monuments that are being taken down is the way I felt. Like you were trying to support the idea of not taking them down?
No. What I am trying to say is that I don't think that it's about racism or slavery. I don't think those are the real issues. I think that the reason people are wanting these statues to come down is because we are now living in a generation that is pissed off and getting offended by everything. For example, you are wearing a Peanuts shirt. I'm not a Peanuts fan, so that shirt offends me. You have to take it off. Or I'm wearing a bandana, so that offends you, and I have to take the bandana off. It's stupid shit that people want to get offended about rather than tackling real-world problems and real-world issues. They'd rather attack a piece of metal and cement rather than combat real racism and real issues of slavery and propagate themselves up as heroes and martyrs and real life activists pretending to make a change.
I don't know how you can say that this has more to do with people that are, I don't know, special little snowflakes that get offended by everything they say, when in all actuality there's been people trying to get those monuments down now for years, way before even I was a kid. So this has been an ongoing issue for a long time.
Oh yeah, and
I don't see how that could be an argument.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there aren't people who haven't wanted these statues to come down, and I'm not saying that these people, that this is somehow a new thing in that regard. What I'm saying is the propagation of these issues and the blatant media, here you go, motherfuckers, is what's new. Why is this suddenly now front page news when it should have been the case when these statues were first erected or at the end of the civil rights movement? You know, why, the Civil War happened in the 1860s. Why now, in 2017, is it now being addressed and propagated by the media and the government in that regard? Why?
But it has been since the 70s at least, maybe even further back. So I think that argument's flawed. It's been in the news. It's been on TV. People have been trying to get them took down for a long time. This isn't something that's new.
Okay, now, and a lot of the argument that stems for these, in favor of these statues, actually comes from a piece of legislation that is, let me bring it up. It is it's Public Law 85-425, instituted on May 23rd, 1958. And it's detailed in Section 410. The administrator shall pay to each person who served in the military or Navy forces of the Confederate States of America during the Civil War a monthly pension in the same amount and subject to the same conditions as would have been applicable to such persons under the law in effect on December 31st, 1957, if his service in such forces has been served in the military or naval services of the United States. So, in effect, it is recognizing Confederate soldiers as U.S. military personnel, is what this declaration is stating. And that any monuments, and it correlates with other legislations, that any monuments, headstones, memorials, etc., would not be taken down, altered, or tampered with in any way. So that's the premise of that argument. And that's where things really tend to get skewed. And I can understand where you're coming from with the whole losers don't get trophies thing. I agree with you. A loser shouldn't get a trophy. If you lost, you lost. But what it's being sold as is that they're not trophies, or even tokens. They're remembering what had happened and giving recognition to those who gave service. Kind of like Vietnam Memorial. We sure as hell didn't win Vietnam, but we've got a few memorials that have been erected for soldiers who have died in that war.
Right, but the people that were in the Vietnam War were American soldiers who flew American flags, and they were united. These people, these monuments dedicated to Confederate soldiers, were pretty much treasonous in the fact that they were trying to secede from the Union troops.
Yeah,
and divide America into two.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I'm talking as far as legal legislation is concerned. It does recognize Confederate soldiers as United States citizens and privy to the same military rights as regular military personnel. Unfortunately, that is legal legislation. The United States government, and by proxy the people, have to recognize the Confederate Army's personnel, not their actions, not their ideologies, but the personnel as American citizens and American soldiers in that regard. Whether you agree with it or not, thank you, federal government, for stirring up that fucking pot.
Okay, but regardless as to whether or not the federal government believes that they should be up, nonetheless, the fact is that these people seceded, not succeeded, like I noticed you were saying in your previous videos, succeed. It's secede. They seceded from the Union troops.
My tongue has dyslexia.
Okay. Well,
especially when I'm drinking, some things come out slurred and one word sounds like another.
All right, but the thing is these guys were forming their own form of government. It wasn't. It wasn't what we go by today. It was a traitorous.
They essentially wanted to do. They wanted to do to the United States what the 13 colonies did to Great Britain in 1776. They wanted to say, "Fuck you, we're doing our own fucking thing." Essentially.
Okay, but how does that have to relate with Martin Luther King and gay marriage?
What it comes down to essentially is, like I said, I don't think it has as much to do with racism and slavery and not wanting to honor those things as it does in the snowflake. Everybody's getting offended by everything. I think it's just being held up to the public by the media as a pretext to further this whole race war and division against the people.
Okay, well, that contradicts your earlier statement saying this isn't something that is new, because it sounded like you were saying that it was something that was new.
Oh, and then the media propagation in this instance is new. Like, why is this never been? Why did we not rip these statues down in the 1960s or even when they were first erected?
But they have been trying to get them down at least since the 1960s.
Yeah.
People have been very offended from these statues since they've been erected.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a new snowflake thing.
Yeah. Well, we are obviously in agreement that this snowflake thing, everybody being offended by everything, is a fairly new aspect in our culture. A decade ago, we weren't offended by every little fucking thing. Nobody was offended by the Confederate flag on the General Lee and the Dukes of Hazzard TV show. Nobody cared. Okay?
No, that has really nothing to do with the statues as far as I'm concerned. That has to do with an old TV program full of hillbillies that were pretty much set in their ways, and there's no way you can really change that as long as those people themselves weren't responsible for wanting to maintain slavery or kill and fight to maintain slavery.
Yeah. And, I think that's a common misconception that people have, and this is one thing I would like to address. I'm not sure if this is your line of thinking. I don't think it is, but correct me if I'm wrong. The South, or I should say the majority of people in the South, are not for slavery. They are not for segregation from the United States or separating themselves from the United States for the sake of slavery and racism and keeping people, regardless of their nationality, as property. They are not against that. They are like you and I for the most part, equal rights and liberty for everybody else. If there is an issue of wanting to leave the United States and form their own country, it is for other issues. Such as what's happening in California, having threatened to leave the Union when Donald Trump was elected, and a few other states wanting to leave the Union for this, that, or the other. There are always many, many underlying issues that many people would support or would not support. It's just a matter of individual opinion and whatever the majority rules. But I can say for honest certainty, having lived in the South, that they are genuinely good people. In fact, they're some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your freaking life. Down here you got the aspect of Southern hospitality, which is really big down here. It's all about morals and respect and respecting your elders and just being polite and courteous. The old golden rules, the shit our parents try to instill in us on kids, that is very big down here.
I know, I get the South. There is some nice people down there. I will say that over in California, when you had people like the Antifa burning flags, American flags, Union troop flags, that was a form of being a traitor. You're being a traitor when you do that to our country.
Yeah.
And those people are just as guilty as the Southerners flying their Confederate flags and the neo-Nazis flying their Nazi flags, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, unfortunately, with that, we come to the issue of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And though we do not like these actions, we are kind of stuck in a position, especially as activists, where we are fighting for freedom of speech, but unfortunately, there are going to be aspects of freedom of speech that we aren't going to like. Somebody is going to want to express their feelings and their beliefs freely, even if we don't agree with it or feel that it is wrong in any way, shape, or form. And unfortunately for people like us who are not neo-Nazis, who are not KKK, have to respect everybody's right of freedom of speech, even if we don't believe in or agree with what they're saying or believing in.
Okay,
it's a two-headed coin.
All right, just like it's illegal to deface money, you can't deface money. You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to be burning American flags.
Yeah.
And to fly a traitorous flag such as the Confederate flag is in the same category. So I'm not trying to say let's give these people burning American flags any leeway. I'm saying let's actually and let's just go after the Confederate flag people. What I'm saying is let's go after both of these fuckers because it's un-American as to what they're both doing. You cannot fly a traitorous. I mean, you can fly a traitorous flag. It's not illegal to fly a Nazi flag.
No.
The thing is let's take down these monuments and put them in a museum. First off, one and foremost, because if you guys are so worried about your monuments being took down or destroyed, why wouldn't you rather take them down, put them in a museum, unlike having them torn down and destroyed like you witnessed the other day, where they literally ripped the statue out of the little
they ripped it down from its pedestal. Yes.
Yeah, its pedestal. They ripped it down and destroyed it. Now, why wouldn't you rather take that statue, put it in a museum, and preserve it for the history books? Or why would you risk people getting upset, and rightfully so, and destroy these things? Why would you do that?
What it would really come down to is, like I said before, the majority rules as far as the overall vote is concerned. For the most part, the majority of the people were not offended by these statues, didn't really give it too much thought until these issues really began being propagated by the mainstream. And thus, it never became an issue to be petitioned to say, okay, are we for or against removing these statues, whether to be destroyed or relocated to a museum or whatever? It never really got that far. Yes, people voiced their opinions and maybe a few petitions circulated, but it never got to the point where it was brought before a governing body to be put to a vote in Congress or even state legislation or even a vote by the people, yay or nay, on taking the statues down.
Okay, because I disagree there. I would say that for the most part, most of the North and the West have voiced their opinions regarding these statues and how that pretty much losers shouldn't get trophies, and they would like to see them put in a museum or something. And for the most part, their feelings regarding the situation have been suppressed until someone decided to finally rip this statue apart. And then now all of a sudden you see that they're actually taking down some monuments. They are taking them down. And I don't think they're taking them down because they realize a good majority of people have decided that they don't like them and always have. They're taking them down out of fear that they're going to get destroyed.
Yeah, and maybe that is for the best, preserving it in a museum or other safe havens. But we also have to ask the question of, is that going to be enough to satisfy the people in question? Is that going to be enough to put out the fires of anger and hatred and racism and being offended in regards to these things? Or are they still going to be pissed off? Oh, well, we don't want these in our museums. Or we don't want these here. Or we don't want these there. We don't want them around, period. Is it ever going to be enough for these people? Is something that should definitely be asked.
I think you can look at other examples of countries that have done this, such as like Germany, when they took down the statues of Adolf Hitler. It really seemed to put out the fires in some aspects, although there is some forms of Nazism that still have propagated to this day. There is probably by far a lot less than there would have been if those statues would have still been erected. I think that it was an overall victory for the people that were against Nazis. And I think that the same thing would more than likely happen here, although there probably would be a couple snowflakes, as you would put it, that would be offended by them being in museums. The majority of the people, I do believe, would feel as if they were victorious and leave it at that and just put it in the history books. And I do feel as if taking them down could cause some backlash by some extremist right people that might want to retaliate, kind of like that guy who ran over a bunch of people at the Charlottesville protest.
Yeah, and in regards to that protest, I'm not sure whether you're aware of this or not, but that was actually a small corner of the protest. Yeah, where
thing. I don't buy it.
Yeah, what all happened there was actually just a small section of the protest. There was this whole video on it. RT covered it. A few other people covered it, stating that a lot of the protesters and whatnot wound up in a situation where they were corralled from the rest of the protest, and where the corral actually was made was where that incident took place. A lot of it was propagated, and like I pointed out in my video, there was an ad placed. In fact, I put up the screenshot of that ad calling for actors and photographers to be at this event in Charlottesville.
So do you think that this guy running these people over was some sort of stunt?
It is entirely possible. I mean, I don't put it past anybody to do anything horrific for any means, whether legitimate or otherwise. I mean, there's a lot of sick people in this world who will do bad things just for the sake of doing bad things, like it says in Batman or the Dark Knight. Some people just want to watch the world burn. Okay, granted, you're going to have people like that, but I think a lot of what's going on in this world, a lot of the shootings, a lot of the violent protests, I think a lot of that is being propagated. Why else is the media always right there at the right times for all of these incidences to occur? Why are people like Alex Jones and all these show pony, phony-ass activists right there on the front lines to report on this shit? Whereas legitimate activists like myself and you get blindsided and go, wait a minute, where the fuck was this?
All right, well, I see how 9/11 kind of set people into that mindset with, like, whether it be Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing being staged events. And I've noticed it, especially from the South, that they're willing to bite hook, line, and sinker for damn near anything being a false flag or staged event. Some of these things, though, are, I mean, I can see questioning stuff as being a good idea, but some of these things are just not staged events. I mean, you can clearly see that man plow through a crowd of people. There's pictures of people flying in the air, being hit with such force that their bodies go propelling through the air.
Yeah, they got projected into the air. Yeah, I saw the video. It's definitely horrific. And I'm not saying that nothing bad happened. I'm not saying that it was a fucking Hollywood production. No, I'm not saying that at all. Something bad did in fact happen. Okay? And I don't condone that in any sense of the word. What I'm saying is, it is suggested that such an event, like many others, and 9/11 especially, have been false flags. That's not saying that it is fake or that it didn't happen. It just means that the reason why it happened is not for the reasons that we are being told. And I am one of those kind of people. I don't believe either side of this fucking story. I look at the facts and make my own determinations, which I think is what everybody should do. You need to look at the facts, you need to look at the evidence, and let the evidence speak for itself. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, but somebody says it's a moose, okay, I'm going to go where the evidence lies. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, god damn it, it's a fucking duck.
All right, so are you suggesting that this thing looks like a staged event and it walks like a staged event, so therefore you think it's a staged event?
No, I'm saying that the evidence says that there was a call for actors and photographers to be there. I am acknowledging the fact that there were likely actors and even crisis actors there. And there was also media present at that exact area at that exact time. Way too much of a coincidence to just ignore. I'm saying at this point there is definitely probable cause to suggest that it was a false flag. But again, more evidence has to come out. You have to confirm that crisis actors were there. You have to confirm the payroll receipts. You have to conduct an investigation regarding the paper trail to this payroll from recipient to the person paying out.
Okay, well, what is your theory exactly as how this was staged? Do you think that the driver was an actor who just decided he wanted to go to prison to be an actor? Or do you think that these people that were hit were actors and stuntmen that were paid to be hit? Or do you think that there were actors that somehow corralled them into a corner? What is your theory?
Well, looking at past events, we know that a lot of these riots and protests were started by paid crisis actors or even people who had a political agenda in mind. And then you get a bunch of other freaking mindless groupthink idiots who see it and just play a game of follow the leader. Not everybody in these riots is a crisis actor. They're legitimately rioting, but do so because somebody, for some reason, whether they're an actor or whether it had a motive, government related or private infrastructure related or just personally related, decided they were going to do something. Okay?
All right, so what I'm getting from you is more like provocateurs, not actors.
Yeah. There are paid provocateurs. We've seen it a few times in the past. And that's one thing that's still a little too early to jump the gun and say that was the case. You gotta look at the facts and you gotta let the evidence speak for itself. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, obviously. I mean, that's pretty well obvious. The evidence is right there in the science. Okay? People don't just go to a peaceful protest to pick a fight. You generally don't do that. It's usually instigated. Now, which side propagated the violent hostility and for what reasons is yet to be determined.
I have heard of people saying that there has been provocateurs within riots before to start looting and burning down Starbucks buildings or what have you. Yeah. But to stage an event where a whole bunch of people get ran over and police helicopters come down out of the sky and people die from that is, I mean, it's not unheard of similar situations. I've heard people talking about the Boston bombings being staged, and there is some bizarre stuff about Tower 7 on 9/11.
Yeah.
But to coordinate something like that without someone coming forward like there has been, especially with 9/11, and without any evidence really leaking out, is beyond me. Well, I don't see any evidence of this so far.
Well, we got to remember, too, with 9/11, it took a little while for the initial report to come out. And it took a little while longer than that for a lot of the parties that had information, like David Shippers, to actually come out and speak. In fact, in many instances, it took many, many years, in fact, near a decade before a lot of people came out with their knowledge of 9/11.
Okay, but to entertain the idea that this was somehow a staged event or a false flag is a little bit out there, in my opinion, just for the simple fact that the things that happened weren't necessarily it wasn't like these people gained anything from this happening. It didn't hurt Donald. I mean, it did hurt Donald Trump in the aspect that some people would say the neo-Nazis are on Donald Trump's side. But why would him being the establishment right now want to hurt himself?
Well, you could look at it this way. I saw a meme a while back, and whether you agree with this theology or not is another matter in and of itself. But the meme stated that it said Donald Trump is focused on fixing America. The Democrats are focused on getting rid of Donald Trump. Think about it. Now, it may not necessarily be the Democrats as a whole. Maybe, because I don't believe in the left-right paradigm, I think, they're all in cahoots. Their only master
You're
is
cutting out really
money
bad.
and those who have it. They only care about who fills their freaking wallets and serves their interests. So I think, whoever is in charge, maybe in many regards Trump is trying to be a John F. Kennedy in many regards. Maybe he's not, I don't know. But if in fact that is the case, it would not surprise me that the governing body in adherence, whether House of Representatives, Congress, the local legislations even, would want to undermine this individual in order to eliminate any opposition to the globalist agenda.
So, are you suggesting that the globalists are wanting to use right-wingers as a fall man in sorts so that they can cause a chaos-type scenario to happen so that they can come in and provide order?
In part, yes. I believe that they are using their democratic puppet to facilitate a lot of the violence that is being perpetrated, because you don't see a lot of violence being perpetrated by the right. Yes, you will see some, but not to the degree that you see it from the quote democratic side. And I'm not siding with either one in this instance. I'm just saying what you are seeing being propagated by the media is the big bad Democrats targeting the Republicans, and it's the Democrats, the liberals, who are the whiny little snowflakes. It's the Democrats and the liberals that are attacking peaceful protesters, even if they're KKK. It's being propagated to make both sides look bad. Yeah, the Democrats are bad, they're getting violent, but Donald Trump is a racist, and by proxy, all Republicans are racist. And it's propagating this idea to divide and conquer the people based on political party affiliations, even though there's no such fucking thing as a Republican or Democrat in reality. Just puppets.
Okay, well then let me ask you this. If you believe that the Democrats and the liberals are trying to stir up a shitstorm, why would you further that mentality by making posts on Facebook saying, well, should we take down the Martin Luther King monument because he was against gay marriage? Why not state the facts opposed to putting out an idea that nobody's suggesting in order to offend people like myself?
Well, for one, like I've discussed with you many times before, and I've discussed this publicly in the past, I like to prompt conversations that initiate critical thinking. I like people to question the official narrative. And a lot of times I will do it in a way that comes off provocative or offensive to some who may or may not understand where I am coming from. And it is also no secret that I am a big fan of shock factor. I will do and say things just to piss people off. But later down the line, these people will actually stop and think because of the exchange that was had as a result of them getting pissed off. They will think about what was said and something will click in their heads. I use the game order out of chaos against the establishment in that regard because I know how to use their weapons against them, and I use them in such a way to actually prompt critical thinking and get people to wake up. Because let's face facts, an alarm clock is never a friendly thing. And I am and have no problem being an offensive, loud, annoying alarm clock. So I will say things that will prompt critical thinking. Sometimes they will facilitate a debate or even a hostile exchange, but at the end of the whole thing, there is a common understanding on both sides, and both sides, more often than not, have walked away learning something new.
Okay, so in other words, you're saying there's a method to your madness.
Exactly. I'm drunk.
Okay.
I like to ramble. But another reason why I posted that post in particular is because if you really stop and think about it, today it's the racial issue. What's tomorrow? What's the day after? Everybody's always going to be pissed off about something. Everybody's always going to wind up bitching that their rights are getting trampled on. I mean, look at 2016. We went from transgenders to shooting gorillas to the political debates, which was more like a fucking episode of llamas with hats, in less than a 6-month period. We jumped from one level of insanity to another, to another, to another, within a 6-month period of half of a fucking year in 2016. Who's to say that 2016 isn't going to be the same thing? Today the other day it was the riots in Charlottesville. Yeah, soon after that it was the statues getting ripped down. Tomorrow it's going to be something else. Granted, race and feminism seem to be the top contenders for these issues today. But what's going to happen tomorrow? Are the transgenders and the homosexuals going to be offended by something else? I mean, we recently had that issue where a Mormon bishopric cut the mic to a girl who was coming out to her congregation about being gay. Okay? There's a facilitation. There's a fire starter right there. Who's to say that tomorrow that's not going to be the issue? And then you're going to have people calling for the Martin Luther King statue to be removed. And at which point that fuels a divide between the LGBT community and the black community, because you have gays' rights versus civil rights.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. That's a pretty complex theory for me. It's almost as if you'd have to look into the future. Do you think that there's any chance whatsoever, instead of this Facebook post you made regarding the Martin Luther King statue and gay marriage, instead of it being a calculated way for you to stir up critical thinking or some sort of controversy, do you think there's any possibility whatsoever that you could have just been falling for right-wing propaganda?
No, because I don't
No?
subscribe to the right wing or the left wing. I don't pay attention to mainstream media other than what it requires me to report on. If I need to report on an issue, I see something happen like what happened in Charlottesville or the Boston Marathon bombing, so on and so forth. Relevant issues that need to be investigated and talked about, then yeah, I will pay attention. But as far as the left-right paradigm and what either side is propagating, I really could give two flying fucks what a person's ideology is. I have my own personal beliefs, some of which coincide with democratic ideologies, some of which coincide with liberal right ideologies. You know, I consider myself to be a true American, not a blind follower to any particular construct.
All right, so you almost could say that you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you felt as if by putting out that post, it would spark a idea within someone's mind about how could I say this? You assumed that by putting that post out, no one would be offended, or did you actually think that it was going to lead to people awakening?
Initially, anybody's going to be offended by anything. And what my purpose in that post was two parts. One, prompt critical conversation, possibly out of a debate or misunderstanding of my meaning of posting the said post. My meaning for posting said post is to awaken the sheep and educate people who would otherwise be ignorant, and to put the idea in the minds of those who are awake that, hey, this could be the next issue on the horizon.
Okay, so you did think that by them taking the Confederate monuments down, that some way, somehow in the future, that's going to grant the idea to start taking down statues like the Martin Luther King statue. Am I correct?
It is a very strong possibility. I mean, you have Christians who are offended by the satanic statues that have been erected. You have got atheists or people of other religious ideologies that are offended by the posting of the Ten Commandments on government properties. You have people who are offended by virtually everything. So why would it not be the case that somebody from the LGBT community, if not a vast majority of the LGBT community, would in fact be offended by a statue representing an individual who stood against gay marriage and homosexuality, being that he was a Lutheran. Or not a Lutheran, no, a Protestant. Is that right? He was a Protestant?
I wouldn't know. But let me reiterate
He was Christian.
this.
He was a Christian pastor. I'm not sure what religious ideology, but he was a Christian pastor who traditionally stands against most of what LGBT stands for.
You do realize that Martin Luther King never fought and killed to maintain the idea of gays not getting married.
Oh yeah,
Well,
I completely understand that, but that does not mean that somebody won't be offended by it. I mean, I actually have a friend in my church. He is a Abraham Lincoln actor. He looks just like Abraham Lincoln. I swear to you on this. And he and I were talking one day, and he was telling me how he'll dress up as Abraham Lincoln on holidays to do Civil War reenactments, which is a common thing in the South, or make public appearances as Abraham Lincoln. And he'll get a lot of shit from people sometimes who cling to these Southern ideologies and say that Lincoln wasn't our president. If you're going to dress like that, you need to get the fuck out of the South. Even though this man has lived here all of his freaking life. And he's a great, great guy.
Okay, but these people in the South saying that are living underneath the American flag. At the same time, they fly a Confederate flag, which was an army that seceded from the Union troops and began to form their own ideology as to what they think America should be, and in doing so, created a form of division and segregation, which led to war, ending up in death.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, war sometimes is the result. Nobody in their right mind should or ever would want war and death on the part of pursuing what they want, even if it's independence from something that they don't agree with in any form or fashion. I mean, look at the 13 colonies. They rebelled and fought against the British monarchy over taxation. Okay? There was no real violence there until they went to war. The British government hadn't been exercising any violence over anybody. It was just, they didn't want to be taxed. So the 13 colonies said, fuck you. We're out this bitch. You want to fight over it? Let's fight. And a lot of people feel that's what was happening between the Union and the Confederacy when they parted ways, is that there was a lot of underlying factors that, not just slavery. Slavery was in fact one of those factors, but it was not the only factor, and in many regards it was not the main focus or main factor that led to the separation of the South from the United States, or even the war in and of itself. And a lot of people feel that the government, especially in today's time, has gotten a little bit too big for its britches, and that the states in question would probably be better off, I should say, leaving the United States, leaving the Union, and should have left the Union, and were rightfully justified in wanting to leave the Union back in the 1800s because the government was trying to get a little bit too big for its britches.
Okay, even if that resulted in there being slaves to this day.
Well, like I said, a lot of people don't necessarily agree with the slave aspect of things, but there were other people who do. Okay, and it's majority rule. That's not to say that at some point in the South, if the South had won its independence in the Civil War, that at some point slavery would not have been abolished. There stands that real possibility, because eventually people do grow up and they get over their prejudices. It took the United States, even after the Civil War, nearly 100 years to get over their prejudice and afford all people equal rights under the Constitution and end segregation.
Do you not see how, if it were to even prolong it by one day longer, that could be really bad?
And that is a very real possibility. That is a very real possibility that we could still, in fact, have slaves in the South today. And at which point, my father, being a McClellan, being of Scottish descent, could have in fact been a slave in the South, and by proxy, maybe even myself a slave in the South. You never even know what might have been. We only know what has happened and what has been, and can only speculate as to what might have been. And it is a very real possibility that you are right, and that we would probably still have slavery today. But then again, maybe you would have had somebody stand up and say, though slavery is bad, and at that point in history, people will go, yeah, you know what? You're right. Let's find a better way of doing this.
Okay, but I'm getting a lot of what ifs and stuff from your theory here.
Well, that's all you can account for is what ifs, you know? And in regards to something that did not happen, all you could do is speculate. You know, what if my aunt had a dick? She'd be my uncle. Okay? You don't know what might have been in a situation that never happened.
All right, so I get what you're saying to an extent. I understand there's been a lot of atrocities that have been performed underneath the Union troops' flag, such as the Native American Holocaust. There's been a lot of different things. The thing is what's done is done. We can't change the past. We can't take a magical time machine back through the past to see what if, or into the future to see what if. We can only deal on what is now. Like you've said before,
Exactly.
there is no fate but what we make. And in order to make our fate, we have to work on the present. We can't really jump. Right. We can't focus on what ifs, as far as I'm concerned. Do you or do you not agree that if we were to currently take the statues and put them in a museum so that they don't get vandalized, even though I could give two shits what happens to the statues because I hate them with a passion, do you believe that if we were to keep them in a historical museum, that it would probably be better than us destroying them?
Granted, putting them in a museum is better than destroying them, at which point you are going to have a lot of pissed off Southerners who feel that their heritage and ancestry are being attacked, because you got a lot of people down here who are very big into genealogy and have ties to the Civil War in many regards that not necessarily support slavery, but just for the fact that, you know, these are members of their family whose memorials have been desecrated. Yeah, you would definitely have a problem. That'd be like me taking a shit on your grandma's grave, kind of thing, you know? You wouldn't be too...
like you taking a shit on my great-great-great-great-grandmother's grave.
Or digging up her corpse and raping it, kind of thing, you know? Not something you'd be too happy with, right? You'd probably be like, Chris, if I see you, I'm going to whoop your fucking ass. You get what I'm saying, though. It's not.
I don't see how there's really that much of a comparison.
Well, it's not even something that needs a comparison. Just pure and simple. It's not something that you would generally be happy with. That I had such audacity to
dig up anybody's grave and started raping it, I probably wouldn't be happy with it.
Exactly.
That's necrophilia.
Exactly. You know, and you're going to have that aspect too. You know, you're going to have people who are going, oh, well, you're destroying public property, who are going to be pissed off about that. You're going to have people who are going to say, well, these were my ancestors that you're disrespecting. You know, you're going to have all of that. And, you know, so I agree with you that it is definitely better to put them in a museum than have them be destroyed. But what I question is that going to be enough for these people? Because like you said, even you hate these statues regardless, and hate them so much to the point that you care less what happens to them. You know, is that going to be enough for these people? I mean, would it be enough for the Jews to put a statue of Adolf Hitler in a museum? Or would they want that sumbitch melted down and thrown into the fires of Mount Doom? You know what I mean?
I don't really understand your argument too much, but I do know that I would much rather my ancestor be put in a museum opposed to you raping their corpse.
Exactly. And that's why I stand as well, you know, because no matter what you do, somebody's going to be pissed off about it. Okay? And the question that I have always posed in this regard, and that's kind of what prompted our debate here, is is racism and slavery and wanting to not honor these aspects really what all of this is about? Is it really about racism? Is it really about eliminating the ideology of honoring slavery and embracing these concepts? Or is it just a matter of people want something to be offended about, and people who aren't necessarily racist are upset because it's a part of their history, a part of who they were, whether they had separated from the Union and lost or not is irrelevant. It is still part of their history and in many respects their family's history, and want to preserve that history and want the same rights and liberties afforded to them and the soldiers that had fallen as it is to a soldier who fought in, say, the Gulf War or World War II, or even died at the World Trade Center. We have a memorial for the people who died at the World Trade Center, and nobody seemed to have a problem with that today. But, who knows what might happen tomorrow on that one.
But I know you're saying, what if we were, my thing is it's not an argument to me, because they're two completely different things. Like the Southerners, not all Southerners, but the Confederates at least, for the most part, almost all of them, if not all of them, fought to, for one, they wanted to keep slaves, and two, they wanted to secede from the Union troops so that they could form their own form of government.
Yeah.
Because they wanted rights for different states and whatnot. While the Union troops wanted us to unite underneath one law, if you will. And they seceded from that, and that is a form of treason. They tried to go against what is already in place right now, being the American government. The American flag is the Union troops' flag. We won the Civil War, and they killed, and so did we. But they killed for their belief, which is not our belief today. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't hold to those beliefs, but it's a lot of it is a cultural thing and a heritage thing. And heritage is very big down here, and that doesn't mean that everybody who clings to their heritage is necessarily a racist or supports the idea of slavery or is a member of the Ku Klux Klan or a freaking white supremacist or any such nonsense. It's just they're very big into their history and they're very big into their heritage and genealogy and shit like that, which is always a good thing to be a part of. And it is good to remember who you are, where you've been, and also acknowledge where you're going. And I think that's what a lot of people in the South are trying to do, is they don't want to ignore these aspects of their history. They embrace all of their history, not just the good parts, but also the bad parts and even the gray, questionable areas. They embrace all aspects of who they are, where they've come from, and where they're going, and where they would like to go, I should say.
Okay. Well, here's the bottom line, though. The overall majority, there was enough people that were so against these monuments that they were actually able to rip one down and destroy it, despite I don't know if there was any cops holding back any Confederate supporters from stopping them from doing so. I highly doubt there was, because I don't think the cops would condone them even ripping down the statue and defacing it like they did. Excuse me. The thing is, overall, they were able to get that statue down and destroy it. And if these Confederate lovers really love their monuments that much and value their heritage that much, why not peacefully put them inside a museum so that they can preserve their history instead of
being destroyed,
like that one kid did? But instead of putting up a fight and running people over with cars or beating up Antifa, why not use your brain, put them in a museum, and preserve your history instead of risk having your whole history destroyed because you guys don't realize that people aren't down with that kind of shit?
Well, it comes down to, again, the majority, and a lot of the monuments and statues are being taken down as of late, as you've indicated. So maybe that was what needed to happen in order to facilitate this change. And change isn't necessarily bad. In most cases, change is good. So we'll just have to see where it goes. I don't think taking these monuments down or even relocating these monuments to a different facility, even a museum, is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you're not going to relocate somebody's grave. I mean, by all means, do not disturb the fucking dead. Leave the fucking dead alone. As far as a statue goes, you could move that to a museum. I mean, let's take, say, the Rocky statue, for instance. That stood for a long time, but eventually got taken down and moved to a museum, even though a lot of people really liked that statue and wanted to keep it because it was part of their history. That's where they filmed the original Rocky movie, kind of helped put them on the map in a little bit of a way. So, they were very proud of it. And rightfully so. But, there comes a time where people grow, people change, and maybe it's time to put things in a museum. But again,
as far as the grave relocation, they do grave relocations all the time. I mean, would you rather have a grave robber take the Egyptian mummies and destroy them or sell them on the black market, or would you rather have them put in a museum?
Well, again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about grave desecration and whatnot. A lot of people believe that you shouldn't desecrate a person's grave. Where it's their final resting place, that is their final resting place. Let the dead lie, regardless of what they did and why they did it. Let the dead be. If you believe in God, let Him be the judge of their soul on that matter. And just let the dead be. If you want to remove the monuments and relocate them to a museum and honor and still acknowledge the heritage of who you are and where you came from and what you represent, based on your preference, fine, whatever, let's do that. Relocate the statues. As far as anybody's dead body is concerned and their final resting place, that to me is kind of a big no-no. Where they were laid to rest should be where they are laid to rest. And frankly, I wouldn't want to dig those corpses up.
This isn't a question of digging up corpses, though. All I'm using that as a comparison is one, you brought it up. Yeah. Second off, if you were to take a Egyptian mummy, for example, and put it in a museum, opposed to having it sold on the black market where they might sell it in pieces because they may get more money that way, you would much rather the remains of that person be in a museum, just like you would a statue, opposed to it being torn to pieces. This says a soul is always going to meet the afterlife. It's not going to be trapped within the body.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that it's a little too recent to be considered comfortable at this point. I mean, as far as an Egyptian mummy is concerned, that was thousands of years ago regarding a civilization and a culture that is no longer on Earth today, and nobody could trace their genealogy back to King fucking Tut. Okay? Whereas you have soldiers in the South who died in the 1800s who still have family in the South today, who could trace their genealogy back to these individuals. That might be a little too touchy. You know what I mean?
Are you talking about graves or are you talking about statues?
I'm talking about graves. Right?
Well, yeah, for sure. Graves would be a completely different subject than statues.
Yeah. Statues, I'm not opposed to the statues being relocated. What I am opposed to is going about it the wrong way. I think that what's happening is not for the reason that it's being sold for, but it's to propagate hate and division in an attempt to piss people on both sides off, get everybody mad at each other, and fight each other. It's the prison guard mentality. You get the inmates fighting against each other. They're too busy fighting each other to rebel and rise up against the guards.
Okay, but that, all right, I guess I can see that being a plausible scenario. The thing is this is an ongoing subject that's been happening for quite some time. And I don't think it's just something that all of a sudden came out of the blue, like these snowflakes were upset that Trump became president. I do think the terminology snowflake would be a way for the prisoners to turn each other or turn the inmates against each other, if you will. I think that that's something that's kind of just came out upon the blue or out of the blue, if you will. I don't remember liberals being referred to as snowflakes for all that long. I do remember the terminology
That's a fairly new
bleeding heart liberals.
Yeah, it's a fairly new terminology that came about at the end of the Obama administration and during the whole political debates and electoral process that happened in 2016. So it is a fairly new term. What I think happened is, like you said, these issues have been present in people for a while. And there have been contentions and petitions in the past, but haven't been brought and publicized to the degree that they are being publicized now. And I think what has happened is they took the embers from these past flames and poured gas on it and fanned the flames and got a big old bonfire going.
Okay, well, I could sit here all day and try to chip away at your theories to groom you into believing what I would like you to believe, but I do see you have a pretty strong standpoint on your ideas, but I am happy overall that I was able to awaken you to the idea of at least maybe moving these monuments into a museum to preserve them, opposed to us destroying them, even though I don't think they should be up, because I do not feel as if monuments for people that I feel were hateful being took down would cause hate, unless it was from people that already were somewhat hateful.
Yeah.
But that's all I got to say.
Yeah, and I feel that, it's not necessarily that you have enlightened me. I mean, you and I pretty much share a lot of the same viewpoints and have the same feelings in regards to matters such as these. It's that the perception of the situation was different. I'm not opposed, nor have I ever been opposed to the idea of these statues being relocated. Well, the only issue that I have had is questioning the motive behind what is happening and whether or not relocation or even the destruction of these statues would be enough, and to what end would it achieve given the outcome. I always have to question these things because you always have to be prepared for any given scenario. It's like chess. You have to think a few moves ahead of the move that you're presently on. You have to figure out what might be. You have to anticipate what your opponent's next move might be and the moves in conjunction after. Else, how are you going to win a war? And let's not mince words here. In retrospect to combating a New World Order Zionist Illuminati ideology, we are essentially at war, whether it is a war of words, a war of actions, a war of ideologies, or a physically violent confrontation. It is a war on any given variance and degree. And we need to anticipate our next moves in order to figure out how to win and get humanity on the right path. Like I said in my previous video, what's more important in combating racism and slavery? Taking down and destroying a few statues? Or addressing the issues of slavery and racism in your community to end the hate and bigotry, and even petition and fight for the rights of freedom of the slaves in areas such as the Congo and other parts of the world where slavery is still prominent. If you're really about slavery, really be about ending slavery. I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron for me. I think it's a cop-out. I think this whole slavery and racism is just a cop-out to express more violence and propagate more hate and division. Else, why not combat real racism and real issues of slavery?
Well, from both ends of the spectrum, whichever one you side with, there needs to come some sort of compromise from the whole ordeal. Either that or there needs to be bloodshed to see who the victor will be.
Yeah.
I would much rather there be a compromise, almost as I feel there was today with me and you.
Yeah.
Or there needs to be a form of termination to determine the victor.
Well, it may seem that bloodshed is what the Illuminati, as you would like to refer to them, would want. And I am completely with you on that spectrum. I would like to see people exercise logic and reason and look at things from a real standpoint, like I addressed in my previous video. Was the Civil War really about slavery, or were there many other underlying issues, and slavery was just held up as a poster child to justify a means to an end? And so on and so forth, up into the events of Charlottesville and the removal and destruction of this statue. Is it really about slavery and equal rights and racism? Or is it about dividing the people based on racism versus cultural understanding and acceptance? Just like the Martin Luther statue could propagate a divide between the LGBT community and the people that feel that they are being discriminated against because of their ethnicity. It's all, I think a lot of it has to do with divide and conquer and facilitating a means to an end. And we are just pawns on a fucking chessboard. And I think that's what people need to realize is what they are being used for. And really start to think about things as they really are.
It was fun doing this discussion with you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this with me, but I'm going to let you go.
And no problem. You have yourself a good night, man. And before I go, I want people to realize that being from California myself, having moved to the South, yeah, The South is not perfect. The weather is fucking bonkers. The bugs are a pain in my fucking ass. Everything is spread out to the point where you have to travel a great distance just to get anywhere in this fucking place. And people, not all people, but a huge lot of them, are dumber than fucking shit to the point where I have even asked them, is there something in your water that makes you stupid? And I have asked this, and many people will attest to this. But on the flip side, it is very beautiful countryside. You have people who have upstanding morals and values, who would give you the shirt off their fucking back. People love each other. They care for each other. They help each other. And there are many, many good virtues about the South. Yeah, you have aspects such as the KKK and racism that originated in the South as a result of the original Democratic Party. And I'm sure that in many regards the Democratic Party would like to forget that.
Right, but they've quite literally switched sides since then. Actually, today's Democratic Party was yesterday's Republican Party.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure that both parties would like to have you forget all that. But, you know, there's going to be good and bad in all aspects of society. But I want people to actually look at the South as they would in any other area of the world, that there is good and bad, and that there's a lot of beauty in the South, not just in the landscape, but in the people itself. There's a lot of beautiful culture and heritage out here that has nothing to do with slavery, that many, many people would love and would probably wish were aspects of their society and where they live as well.
Let me reiterate that one last time before I leave. Most of the Confederate soldiers were Democrats back then.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they were.
All right, I'm going to let you go, broski.
All right, you take care, brother. Good having you. And until next time, this is the Tin Man with the Resistance. If you are watching this, you are the Resistance.